I saw it on the first press screening, which was on, I think it was Wednesday night in Leicester Square. And there was a moment about 2/3 of the way through where I literally felt myself going, this is great. And it was a sense of real relief, because I was more worried than anybody after the triumph of Skyfall, and having loved Skyfall as much as I did, which is, I have to say, it is still my joint favourite Bond movie, with On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I loved it, and there was always that worry about revisiting something, and is it going to move on? Is it going to be a different movie? Well, as Sam Mendes said, the first thing is it is a very, very different beast. I mean, it is more playful, it is more varied, it is something which very knowingly refers back to the sort of the strange heritage and history of Bond. Whether we're looking at From Russia with Love, or The Spy You Loved Me, or the old heritage of gadgets and Bond gags. It is also a movie which has got more laugh out loud zingers than I remember any Bond movie having for quite a long time. Many of them, I have to say, done by Ben Whishaw, whose role, he plays it beautifully. He has that absolutely fantastic sense of comic timing. So there was a real sense of relief in liking it as much as I did. And when that moment passed, I thought, this is great, I realised how much I'd been enjoying the action sequences. One of the problems with Bond in the past is that sometimes they do tend to be, travelogues and action sequences. Now, we get all that here. We get all the travel. We get Tangier, we get London, we get Rome, we get Austria. And we get nail-biting action sequences with planes and helicopters and cars and, and fights and shootouts, all done in a way that every time it happens, it's like the next level up in a song, the next chorus in a song. I never got bored by those sequences, which is quite something, because I often find that stuff the least interesting part. So what you have is basically a story, as you said there with Daniel Craig, when on the one hand the future is all to do with global technology and global snooping, and the old-fashioned Bond ethos, which is the man in the field looking at his enemy in the eye, that's sort of the centre of it. Then you have Christoph Waltz's character, who was referred to by Sam Mendes, Oberhauser, who is this sort of strange spectral presence that you're not entirely sure, where he's come from, what he's doing, and there are a whole sort of revelations about his character which spin out during the movie. But actually, the thing that really charmed me was you have a terrific central performance by Léa Seydoux, who plays Madeleine Swann, who we first meet in this sort of angular clinic on a snowy hilltop that reminded me very much of Chris Nolan's Inception. It's funny because Inception obviously borrows from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and this then seemed to be tipping its hat back towards Inception in some of those those ultra-futuristic designs. You almost expected Bond to say, I'm sorry, whose dream are we in at the moment? And it's significant that Hoyt van Hoytema, who of course shot Interstellar, which was Chris Nolan's movie, which you loved so much, was the DP in that. But what Léa Seydoux does is she manages to have that brilliant balance of strength and sultriness, and managing to make a character completely three-dimensional and completely rounded. And so what you get at the centre of this is a sense of not just one character with everything happening around him, but a sense of characters interacting, and a fractious relationship growing through the drama. So that means that the thing is grounded in some kind of proper character development, but all the time that's happening, you're also getting exactly the stuff that it is that Bond audiences pay for, which is the action, the spectacle, the glamour, the ludicrous wardrobe changes, the fact that wherever they go, somebody appears to have, couriered fantastic clothes to them. And, you mentioned that thing about the threat of the sockless man.
That's Christoph Waltz,
yes,
who is dressed terribly.
He doesn't wear socks, he's a bad un.
Yes, and he wears proper shoes, and he wears a Nehru jacket. We saw in the clip, he wears the Nehru.
He looks like Ed Straker from UFO without socks, which is a really threatening combination. But so you get all those, the sense of fun and the sense of spectacle, and and the chases and the action sequences. I mean, it's moved on from, in the case of Casino Royale was really Bond catching up with Bourne. That sense of physical endangerment, that when they had the fight sequences, you actually felt that Bond was getting hurt. In the case of Skyfall, I mean, we'll pass over question of sport. In the case of Skyfall, what you had was...
That's an old joke, by the way, Quantum of Solace,
which I still think, I know people have sort of reassessed it, but I still think Quantum of Solace is very, very troubled, and on a writer's level, it's troubled. In the case of this, of course, there are several credited writers, and it's quite something that even with those several credited writers, the plot does actually make sense. The plot, incidentally, is ludicrous, and it requires, as with all Bond movies, a sort of leap of faith to believe the sort of unspooling conspiracy. But the thing that's an indication of how much fun it is that you don't start worrying about that whilst you're watching it. I mean, I found myself, there was 2 moments in the action sequences in which I actually jumped. And I have sat through horror movies in which I haven't jumped at all. There was a couple of moments, which I won't give away, which really, really came as surprises. The opening sequence that Sam Mendes was talking about there, I mean, I know it's, we use digital effects now, but it does have that touch of evil sense. It's laying out the table of the movie with this bravura, what did you say, 4.5-minute sequence in which we go...
Has that ever happened before in a Bond film where there's been that kind of, apparently one tracking shot?
Well, it was really interesting because I was in the cinema watching it, and, we go through it's the Day of the Dead parade in Mexico, and Mexico City, and we go down into the parade, and then we go into hotel, and we go up, and we go out through, and you could almost feel the audience holding their breath, wondering how long this was going to be able to be maintained. But what was important about it was that it sort of laid out the stall. It sort of said, look, there is going to be flash, there is going to be pizzazz, there is going to be stuff here that literally just takes your breath away with the sheer fun of watching it. And actually, the thing I felt most about it was how much fun it was how much I enjoyed it. Skyfall was a very different beast. And as I said, that sense of relief about 2/3 of the way through, which came from realising that it wasn't a replication of Skyfall. It wasn't a matter of doing Skyfall again. It was a matter of moving on and doing something else, but doing it in a way which worked in and of itself. It's funny because you said that when you spoke to both Daniel Craig, and you had the same sense there from Sam Mendes, that there's a sense of sort of completion.
It is just a sense, though.
I think if you have that sense, it's because to have made 2 very different movies, both of which work, what you're feeling is that sense of, okay, walk away now, because you haven't actually put a foot wrong. I suspect this is going to be hugely successful. I think everybody thinks that anyway. It was very encouraging to see the morning after that the reviews were as boldly positive as they were. But in a way, you didn't need to read a review to know that. Just to sit in an audience in a cinema with however many, 1,800 people, whatever it was, and feel the audience collectively gasp when a couple of things happened, feel them rooting for Bond in a way that perhaps in some of the other movies, wouldn't have happened, laughing at the jokes. I mean, proper full-on laughs. There are more laughs in this Bond than there are in most things that pass for comedies nowadays. And then at the end, Lea Seydoux being so terrific, and then Ben Whishaw, brilliant, and then at the centre of it all, Daniel Craig looking for all the world like Bond ought to look.